Its contribution to the development of women's studies is widely recognized both nationally and internationally. Our today's resource person is Dr. Meera Valudan. Dr. Meera has been involved in gender studies since its inception in India since the early 1980s to the extent within the discipline of history. Her doctoral research focused on gender, caste, social reform, nationalism, and popular movements in Kerala. Her earlier study on the coed worker struggle in Kerala was one of the early labor studies which pointed to the complexities of studying gendered identities in social movements, especially in a context where structural changes were taking place in the industry. The focus of her research since then has been on strategies of organization of women in varied contexts, historically and contemporary. Meera has been part of designing and conducting courses attempting more engaging methods of conducting gender studies. She has participated in international, including UN advocacy courses on gender at Rutgers, USA. She perceives her strength in her ability to draw upon and evolve theoretical frameworks based on field surveys, collection of oral narratives to explore the linkages between individual experience and macro processes and its policy implication. Dr. Meera also draws from her own social legacy, coming from a family which had actively participated in the debate on citizenship, social policy, and affirmative action in the 1930s and 40s, and whose lives traverse several modernities such as anti-caste, social reform, state people's movement, nationalist movements. Meera has a vast body of publications. She is a policy analyst and president of the Indian Association for Women's Studies. Welcome, Dr. Meera. A small request for the participants. This lecture is going to be for approximately 40 minutes and you will have a 10 minutes for question and answers. Let's welcome again, Dr. Meera.
Yeah. Thank you so much, RCW. It's really home for me, really, coming back to the institution because we've been there since gender studies sort of emerged as a center itself, as a unit, and also because of the archives also that is located, but very much the growth of women's studies, and I also emerged with the starting of women's studies in India, and therefore there's coming to your institution is a big, very memorable for me, and a joyful also experience. And so thank you all of you. Thank you, Putul, for inviting me to this and for this lecture. What I will focus on is that something interesting that's happened is that with the COVID and lockdown situation and with these millions of labor moving to their homes, you see them on the road walking, you see them in buses, and it was really a very, in a sense, tragic also, as well as a very moving picture of these millions of people, labor that is moving. So that actually has given rise to a kind of new discussion on like, how do you approach migration? Just this visibility itself has given rise to sort of newer questions about how do we approach when we are sort of looking, studying, or either in research or as activists, how do we really look at migrants, and migrants on the move, and in particular crisis situations, So one thing that is obvious is that gets visibility is that how migrant labor is so intrinsic to India's development journey. So that is a very significant part in terms of your approach. That the other thing is how labor is so intrinsic to India's development trajectory. So these are very things. And then you see all these say different sections moving, and you'll see women older people, young girls, young boys, children, disabled, pregnant, sick, all sections moving, but they're not a homogeneous group. Even within each of those, whether it's say, women or it's young men or girls or children, they're not a homogeneous group. So there's a, in terms of the methodology and approach to look at gender, we really need to sort of, delineate the different kind of, there are whole layers of experiences.
Meera,
There are
Meera,
many
can I
levels of,
intervene once? Hello, Meera, can I
yes,
intervene once? You're,
yes,
in fact, you're extremely soft. You're very soft. So can you come
okay,
close?
okay,
Yeah, I thought, yeah,
okay,
because,
okay, okay.
yeah, yeah. Yeah, thank you.
And in fact, when you see all these different sections, you can see young women, older women, old people, you disabled, pregnant, children, boys, girls, sick. All these different sections, when you see moving, like you say they are migrant labor, but then you need to really delineate them, because there are many experiences that are, that what you see is a whole layers of experience. They might be domestic workers going back home, or they may be for construction workers. They could be from just street vendors or rickshaw puller. Whole layers of our society itself. You see them sort of who play a very crucial role. They are sort of moving. So you need to see that in your approach. You need to say that it's not a homogeneous thing of just migrants moving or just labor moving. They're all different kind of layers, and they also come from different, not only experiences, but different kind of power structures, whether they are in a particular industry or some firm or just some workshop or the home for domestic workers. So there are very different. Then they all also belong to different social locations, whether even if they come from a particular state, whether it's Bihar or Orissa or Odisha, or it is Jharkhand or Chhattisgarh or Bengal, they all also from within that itself, they come from specific regions as well as from specific communities, specific locations, and the women. So you have to see this sort of intersectionalities of, with caste, with that. There are a whole lot of labor, like in Kerala, for instance, in the tea plantations. Earlier it used to be Tamil women labor. Now increasingly tribal labor from Jharkhand and Chhattisgarh have been and are coming into the tea plantations, for instance, in Kerala. So there's a shift because the Tamil labor is finding work in Tamil Nadu itself. So there are these kind of changes that are taking place. So different kind of structures of power that the labor is emerging from. Then their social location. So they are then, intersects with caste and class and ethnicities, how gender intersects it. And then when you are studying this, you have to also look at a particular point of time and the region and the area that they come from. This to look at gendered impact. So that's very particular in the approach that you take. And there are different sides of power. You will notice when you're people who are doing studies of migrant labor in different states, small studies are emerging, and some papers, some are in the newspapers, some actually institutions or NGOs. People are studying, and in that you see that the sites of power are very varied. You have public as part of the community or a particular region. You have also the private within the family and the community. Then you have the intimate within the intimate domestic marital relations. So all these different sort of sides of power that you need to look into when you're looking at the labor, which is migrant labor. So one of the things that has emerged recently is it's sort of still just growing, is the kind of situational analysis, like when labor has gone back, what's happening. And there are small studies are coming from different kind of regions, states they're coming from. And they sort of, there are some things which are sort of cuts across all these regions, which are sort of very important in terms of how to move ahead in terms of policy changes. And one of it is that this whole thing about healthcare. Healthcare. So even when they're going back, what's happened is in most places, essential healthcare services have sort of come to somewhat standstill because of the COVID also getting priority. So if you have some kind of previous existing illnesses, and there's also decline in the usages because of the COVID thing. The usages also in most of the parts we find that they are declining actually. And so, like what many places, vaccinations and things have stopped. And, like if you have, for instance, you have to have some kind of treatment for, kidneys or, these kind of things, those essential services have sort of got disturbed with the COVID. So you will find stories even in the paper of people looking around places to go to because that has been turned into a COVID center, So the regular healthcare services have been very badly affected, and those have to be actually essential services. And then there's also the pregnancy related and antenatal care, menstrual, for instance, studies are coming out in terms of, access to even cloth or even to, young girls. In some states, we're distributing in the colleges. Those are closed now. So there are reproductive tract infections which are taking place. And then to top it all, there is also malnutrition. So, and that the reason for that is also the weakening of the social security services. So there's an overall, I mean, these are all intersecting. For instance, there have been some smaller studies on this Jan Dhan Yojana and Ujjwala scheme, which comes under the National Rural Livelihood Mission, and even the National Food Security Act, how food grains have to be distributed to households. With the government had come up these things, and some of the things that when migrants go back, there is this kind of being part of having the documents to avail access to all these are not available, and also the enrollment for say various schemes and all, they are just very weak. And therefore, like even food grains to families which are supposed to be, they don't have ration cards among them, and then neither there is any identification being done at the panchayat and local level. That all depends on how the local governance is also working. So do some people get and some people don't get it, so these are the, and there is people, because of that you can now see labor returning to various states, including Kerala. About 1/3 remained, but there are since the last almost 2 months now, labor has been returning to Kerala. Then one of the other things is that in the Anganwadis have closed. And so therefore the preschool children, pregnant and lactating mothers, there are no other alternate source of food supply for these sections, So therefore, even newborns that are affected. And then what happens if the food security is not ensured even otherwise, and also the Anganwadis are closed, and this is one avenue through which special, vulnerable sections access food and other kind of care. If that is not there, then it affects particularly the young women who are there, the children, and then also in terms of food, since there's shortage of food, the girls and the women tend to, because of the patriarchal setup and notion, they really at the, their share is sort of given up or their share is not there. So there is a kind of a cycle of malnutrition that takes place because of all these different intersecting factors in a particular migrant life that is taking place. So you need to look at all these things when you're doing kind of researching this. The other thing is, for instance, there have been something on the Ujjwala scheme where in some area they've given 2.5 liters of kerosene oil for 3 months for a whole family, April to June. And families, some places are large, so people, the women and girls are going out to collect firewood, and then there is a whole lot of cooking going on within where they are living, because there are smaller places in which spaces in which they occupy large families, and that in fact is leading to respiratory kind of illnesses, you know. And then even the Jan Dhan Yojana, which is like rupees 500 per month. Some of the surveys which have come is, I mean, it's not much because the family say it's about 5-6 family. Minimum if there are 5 members, 500 per month, and then you know, it just doesn't serve enough. And then there have been cases, many accounts they stop operating after the first month when they receive 500. There are quite a few of that. Then also the banks are further away, so combining with your household care and other thing to go up to the banks to receive them, you know, if there are any nearby, you know. So all these kind of barriers are there, and also access is very difficult. For instance, the other thing is that Manrega, in fact, there is even otherwise Manrega was not really fulfilling the work needs of those who were there already. And now, of course, some work sites they are have increased in some areas and all, but it's still just nowhere near sufficient to the need at all. So therefore, people are now returning to different places, and in the context where labor laws, many of the states, they are in fact almost suspending labor laws. So what they are going back to is even worse than what they came when they came from, you know, except very highly skilled kind of work where they are able to bargain. Otherwise they're just not able to bargain because even work has lessened from where they had come earlier, you know. And then there is also some studies have been done where, you know, relief packages which have gone to say which is given to say in the construction site or bricklanes, there the work is such that you work as a couple or you work as a family, you know. So therefore it stretches over 4 or 5 people, but the relief is actually for not enough to cover the whole family, and women don't get in that. If there are separately anything of their own, they are considered part of the family. And so this is then the construction workers and among bricklayers also for those days. So they've really not got their, you know, due wages for their work. In any case, most of the labor which were returning, as you must have heard them saying that they've not been paid for 2-3 months and their food is running out wherever they are. So obviously these services are not reaching them, you know. And so then there's, because of this fall in household income and or no very little income, women from being workers in a city or doing some kind of labor have now become totally caregivers in the family. So there's a shift like that. They become, and that's unpaid work, you know. So from labor, they're becoming caregivers in the household, and they have to manage within that. And then, for instance, the vulnerable section, the single women, in fact, there are 71.4 million single women. 64% of them are rural, and work, if available, are very far out in some areas. So managing the children and other managing the house itself. So they are in very vulnerable kind of situation. The other point is because the overall in India, in everywhere, violence against women, particularly domestic violence, has really gone up, and unemployment, insecurities, the COVID, which is the loss of income, alcoholism, in the patriarchal structures, and not very conducive governance, local governance structures, or you know, these avenues for redressal. These are all sort of institutions are sort of eroding, and access is eroding. You know, so violence is also sort of rising. So these are the kind of situational analysis that you need. Is one which I said earlier is the approach. How do you approach, you know, to have an intersectional approach and also to see the different kind of vulnerabilities and how different categories, whether it's caste, class, or ethnicity, or single women, or disabled, or trans persons. These how these it sort of intersects with specific kind of vulnerabilities that are there. That then the labor itself, and then the whole thing is that how do you situation analysis, which I said some of the findings which are sort of coming up now, and not in a very big way, but they are sort of started to come up. So in that you have to look for those aspects. The other is the whole question of policy. What is the, what it brings for very strongly. If you see the Supreme Court, which at the last stage started discussing what state should do, what the center should do, because of the labor, migrant labor on the move had become so severe that the Supreme Court finally took it up. But you will see that it gave some instructions to the states and to the center, but it did not quote any law. No law was cited to say that under this law or under this section of the constitution or under this, that this should be done. It just gave some directives, without any quoting anything. So there is the legal system itself was not able to really able to recognize the thing. And part of the reason is there is a lack of integrated policy on migrants. This doesn't exist at all. And why that is so is because different kinds of labor, there are different kinds of labor, and that needs to be recognized. Then on the nature of migration, in the data and in the analysis, in the national statistics, the different kind of nature of migration itself is still an area that's expanding information on that. And the magnitude of migration, most of the labor is in the unorganized sector. So there are, those areas that they're not in the national accounting systems at all. So how can you make programs when they don't figure in your national accounting systems, Then most of the labor is short-term and circular, and these have not yet sort of figured in the accounting systems and all. So then there is this whole question of discussion that is there, has been going on. What do migrants consider when they sort of migrate? And some of this I can also give examples. There are many variables. I can also give examples from Kerala, but one of it, of course, availability of work is there. Then wages in Kerala, in many of the things, they find the wages are much higher than they have received anywhere in their origin states at all. And then there are presence of other migrants, in that area. Then also whether, how conducive is the environment when they go to a place, the levels of, it's also levels of local hostility or acceptance. So there is that aspect which has come up in the studies. Then infrastructure. So in terms of is housing available? Is there a place for them to stay? Then there is social networking among labor who network with their own kind of family members or community members. That also those are also considerations for choosing an area. And so then also you have to look at the policies of the sending those from states which they migrate from the labor and also which receive them. What are the policies in both these ends that affect their, in terms of their work or choose where to work, and or they have no choice, So therefore, then we need to look into see that what are there any is everything just are there no protections? So, but of course there are protective laws, and one is the constitution itself. The constitution, the article 15, 16, 16. These are sort of equality of employment in public jobs. Then there is 19.1 is very important. Article 19.1. It gives you the freedom to move and the right to work anywhere in India. So therefore, then there's a Food Security Act. There's a Sarva Shiksha Abhiyan for children. There's a right to education. There's the Interstate Migrants Act. There's a Contract Labor Regulation and Abolition Act. And what we are now under in the COVID situation was both the National Disaster Management Act as well as the one on epidemic. These are the two things which were sort of which were covering us during the epidemic, during the pandemic. There's a Street Vendors Act also in public spaces. There have been many commissions and committees over the years which have sought to look at migrant labor. And there's a National Commission, I remember 1991, and CWDS and the National Commission for Rural Labor producing documents to give to the National Commission. I think these are all institutional histories which we need to regain and search out for. And then 2007, the National Commission on Enterprises in Unorganized Sector, NCUS. Then there was 2017, I think is the most significant one that has come out so far, is a working group on migration by the Ministry of Housing and Urban Poverty Alleviation. And why it's important is it looked at 3 levels. One is migration in the labor market structure, 2, social protection, and 3, housing. So these are the aspects that particular committee, that working group on migration, 2017, I think that was the most comprehensive, that really looked at the policy aspects. And then it also looked at what are the constraints for access to various social services and what comes through. And even if you look at your own states, and if those who have been involved with migrant labor and providing sort of food and other aspects to them, travel facilities in different areas. One is that for the local, at the local level, and if wherever they are, there is also to access various facilities, you have to need a period of residence is required. These are local area level kind of administrative measures. Then language is an issue. So there are different states have their own level of identification process. Then local delivery systems are also varied in different states. And for instance, some NGOs have tried to use the Sarva Shiksha Abhiyan and tried to provide model kind of educational thing to migrant labor children, some kind of seasonal schools and specific sort of training to their kind of skills. And these are, there are these, in between, which NGOs and even some states have also tried some. And there's also even ICDS, which sort of mandates that migrants should be included in all their programs in urban settlements. So, but for all these, you need this interstate MOUs are needed. So some states have done that, many have not done that. So there are a whole lot of other, so the different levels of coordination that is needed for ensuring the labor laws as well as the social security services, is that labor is a state subject. And social protection, you have both, states have their own social protection programs, but there are also central level, like now during the COVID, different kind of announcements have been made by the government. There's also but the delivery is local. The delivery systems are local. So therefore, there's no coordination between the state and the center and the local. And because of this lack of coordination is there also because of, there's no policy also to ensure this kind of coordination. Therefore, whatever is announced doesn't get to the sections it's meant for, because each state has its own activities ongoing. And there is central pool, whatever comes in, how is it distributed at the local level? These are very significant kind of, this coordination issues are very central to the policy thing. Then there's no redressal mechanism also for, like if they're not receiving anything, where do you go and say we've not received this? So there are those mechanisms are also, So therefore, some of the things that have been which has come and which has been suggested is that to have policy suggestions have come in the sense that there has to be some for access that for social service benefit, there has to be a portability that you're going back to your home, but you don't have a card. You may have something when you're in one of the states where you're working. So you need access, and that whatever identification that you have for access to service, it should be portable, so that when you go back to your home, or when you return to your area where you're working, it gives you access. So one of the big demands is access and portability of benefits. Then so there has to be some kind of universalized kind of registration system for migrants and families. So that registration which is there. And in the middle of this pandemic, the labor department, central labor ministry had in fact given a sort of advisory to the different states, asking for an enumeration of migrant labor in the different states. But the time given was just 3 or 4 days to enumerate migrant labor, in the middle of the pandemic. So therefore, like only because like Kerala, for instance, because the local self-governance is strong, and there was a policy for special programs for migrant labor. At that local level, they were able to start the enumeration. Even then, it's not complete. Even in Kerala, but despite the enumeration that is taking place. So if you cannot enumerate, then how do you design a program to access them? So therefore, you need some registration system where sort of, that when the moment you arrive, you are registered. So there has to be some kind of system that is there. The other is that there's that social security card, that there has to be a central level policy as well as an act in terms of what is the legal minimum level of social security. That is very significant because you have to have a legal minimum level. So it won't be left to different states to just hand out some, some packs of this or that grade, just sort of throw it at labor. There has to be some legal minimum level. So therefore, at the policy level and also in terms of as enactment, it's very important. But this parliament, I think a lot of those ordinances will be coming, and there'll be no discussion because there's no question asked. So we don't know like whether these things at all will come up in the coming thing for discussion. So in terms of social security and having a legal minimum level of social security for all migrants should be there. And there has to be a standard eligibility criteria. So that there has to be a standard, and these need sort of wider kind of discussion that is needed for these level of that is there. And then there are also, of course, immediately, there are very immediate concerns which you can, when you, it's not in the media or in the public eye too much because of totally irrelevant things that are being focused on these days. So there has to be, in terms of that, how you can see the voices which are coming in from all the areas, wherever you live, will find that work is what everybody is seeking. They're seeking work, So Manrega, it's universal. You have to also now widen it to all above 18 years of age in a household. So therefore, in terms of more work, there should be more work site. There should be more days of work, which should be there, as well as it needs to be, above 18 years in a household. It should be covering. Then payment, you will find that these payments, even those who stayed back and who were there, who were working on the narratives which have come out, they've not been paid wages. So when you don't have food security, you don't have an income, you come unemployed, you lost job, you come back, you don't even have, you're doing, go into some work that's available, then you don't get your wages, then, so something has to be, there has to be some mechanism which sort of ensures in the interim period, there has to be some, cash payments. That all the when interviews are done, is they're saying we just don't have money to buy things. We just need, they're sort of pawning their whatever they have. Even household items are getting, utensils are getting pawned to buy food. So therefore, I think there has to be some interim, and what is the mechanism, and that they need to learn from states which are doing it. So therefore has to be these models. It's not that they don't exist. There are states which are attempting these, and what are they, what they're doing through local governance. And since anyway, the local governance systems in most states are so poor and women have not much of a say over there, they really, there has to be, something has to be evolved in terms of that immediate cash payments. And particularly looking at the vulnerable sections, single women, disability, trans person, aged, these sort of sections, those who don't really have proper homes, housing at all. And even that there has to be that this Jan Dhan Yojana should design a minimum wage, not just any 500 rupees or something. Why not a minimum wage? Work out on in the Jan Dhan Yojana, per day. So if it is per day, this much is a minimum wage. So if for a month, how much should you give to a person and the working persons in that area, in the family? So therefore, these are things which can be worked out. It's not that it's impossible, but it needs very much, you need a governance system that's open to the priorities of the people, and to whom these sort of ideas can be put forward. And why health, when there's such a crisis of pandemic and all, why is health has to be an essential service? Which means all the existing health centers, PHCs and all, they have to be run with as essential services. So people with varied diseases, not just the pandemic itself, other kind of needs which are there, so they have to be carried out as essential services. So these are sort of, there are, it's not as though there are no models, or there are nothing to take these. There are enough of these models which are available for how to carry these forward. Then the public distribution system itself. And so it needs, you need a sort of, both in terms of a whole range of changes. I would say that a whole range of paradigm shifts are needed in terms of both how you sort of, approach it. How do you do a situational approaches in terms of intersections and the different kind of vulnerabilities, and then how do you look at the different in the intersection, see the different kind of experiences and different kind of power structures and the social locations, caste, gender, ethnicity. Then how in a given point of time and region, how you capture the reality, capture the reality. So the situational analysis is very much important there, and so The other thing is that the healthcare, in fact, which I have already said about, all these, vaccinations and regular care of particularly, pregnant and this antenatal services and all these different kind of, these are also linked with how you sort of create it into essential services which are there, and the social security which needs to be done, the different government programs, the lacuna in the different kind of programs which are there. And also in terms of the institutions which have closed, like and programs like Anganwadi, schools itself, midday meals, some of these have also stopped, So therefore, these midday meals was a very important part of, our students coming for schooling and other for education. And so far as access to food is concerned, in Kerala, it was very right from the beginning. One of the slogans was that nobody should go hungry in Kerala, So the food kits are the Anganwadi and the food kits are delivered to the households through the panchayats. So each of those who are attending and the Anganwadi workers take responsibility to ensure that in there's all the food kits that reach these households. So the children, there's food in the house for the family to cook for them. They don't go without food. And therefore, there also in terms of young girls and the young people, particularly that young people are at home now, and there are a whole range of pressures on young people. In fact, a lot of depression, all kind of mood shifts, and there's also suicides of young people, including children, which are taking place. And therefore, you need a lot of discussion on mental health as well as health in a much larger kind of context, looking at health in a very larger kind of context, And then how the food security and malnutrition, how these are sort of linked with, and also the government schemes and why they are not reaching, what are the limitations for those over there. You need not only that you need these studies are there, or these insights are coming from so many regions, but we need to have a very strong sort of voice, need to come together to voice these as a policy. Different forums need to come together and put it forward. And I think what's happened is because of the pandemic, this sort of not being able to get together, this had sort of weakened our sort of the agency. Agency has got sort of in terms of putting across these ideas, and with all side stories going on, the main things don't get that focus, and for us to collectively voice that, because as you can see that governance, increasingly there has been a lot of centralization. In fact, the states, all the different states are struggling with resources now because of there be no support from the different, from the center itself. Even the GST dues to crores have not come to them, and one excuse or the other is coming from the center, So therefore, one, you have the states which are sort of cash crunch that they are facing, and then they have to look after the pandemic and all these different kind of food security and different kind of vulnerabilities. And then you find that not having a responsive governance at all, that which every day is sort of denying that the pandemic is growing, that there's severe economic distress and unemployment, and there's growing violence of varied kinds. I mean, there has to be that, and that has to get across only if we also need to voice these, and we need to, I think now collectively, just as you're having a discussion here now, we need to now have more of these discussions and then collectively put across these somehow in some form or the other. Because we also need to think of new forms of putting across issues in the context of the pandemic. You know, how do you express, how do you push for policy changes at different state level or at the central level? How these also all need a lot of you know new kind of thinking of how to go about this, because even all our research, after all, they are sort of directed at in terms of policy and in terms of suggestion that come forward. We have it's not like we are doing just research for research sake. There's a direction to what we are looking at. So I think that some of the priorities in migration among migrants and the immediate things which I had pointed out in terms of cash flow, work, health services to different sections, their vulnerabilities, the pregnant and lactating sections, and in terms of childcare. Some of these are very kind of, urgent, which need to be sort of spelled out with their variation in the different states. So that, I think, is something that we need to very seriously think about when we are even studying. We might be studying migration. We also need to also think about that, how do we put across the issues? And I think that those are sort of very important. The policy changes which I had said that we need, how there's no centralized, there's no kind of coordinated sort of, there's no policy, a comprehensive policy on migration, despite an act being there from Interstate Migrant Act being there since 1979. Things have changed. There's been a lot of changes. Circular migration and short term is the largest component. It's all in the unorganized sector, and its large sections are women. So therefore, the whole, there has to be a huge paradigm shift in also, not only in terms of how we are sort of studying, but also in terms of how do you formulate to issues to move ahead. So I think these are sort of very significant kind of things that, and if we don't have, databases. So studies, I think those of us in the universities and other places of research, it's important to sort of, databases is very important to bring out in studies, not just descriptive. We just need, thoroughly more research, in-depth research, and which also have an intersectional kind of, dimension to that. And that kind of research, I think you have to really, have that databases there, because policy, advocacy for policy change, for program design, or for any critique, you need a database to put forward those ideas. So I think this is what I've sort of tried to put forward in my discussion, and I would actually like to now go on to addressing some of the questions that are coming up in my presentation. So Putul?
Yeah, Sangeeta? Hello, Sangeeta?
Yes, I'm there.
Yeah. So please, let's begin the question. I think there are a few questions in the
There
chat
are
box.
many questions.
Yeah.
First of all, let me thank Dr. Meera Valudan for the insights into the issues of migrant laborers and migration, and a lack of an integrating policy, which has already led to a weakening of a social security structure, and health services have got impacted. So thank you for bringing so many points. We will start with the questions because there are quite a many. Anita wants to know, why is the Migrant Social Security Act 2008, why is it not implemented?
No, there are, I mean, that one, see, I told you there's no coordination between the various, the Interstate Migrant Act is very weakly implemented in all states, I can say, all states. And there are even like in Kerala, for instance, I mean, there are, I think, compared with a lot of other states, there are a whole range of programs that have been designed for migrant labor, including housing, education. In fact, there was a very interesting thing is that about mm, there were labor which stayed back for the children's education, and there were about 60 students in plus in this pl- class 12 plus who sort of got very high marks in their 90s. So the government is sort of helping them to go ahead, and one of them has in undergraduates topped the university merit list like that. So there are some of these things that are taking place, including literacy programs. The literacy mission in Kerala, for instance, is having classes, and they are very largely attended by women and men. The literacy classes, so they have a choice actually. One is of course Malayalam, which is there, but they have a choice of Hindi, English, and there are these different multilingual teachers who have come. Some from the labor itself have who are slightly more educated have come. Women teachers have also emerged among them. So therefore, and then there is also housing, then the health camps that are being held. I mean, these are, I think, getting into a kind of a migrant policy that is sort of emerging in Kerala with different aspects. But I think one thing that is very, which has been, we are having a big discussion here is about, migrant labor who come. Why not think of labor cooperatives? In Kerala, labor cooperatives, there's a whole history of labor cooperatives. And there has been some experience of labor going, otherwise they're going through contractors and agents. They're dependent on whoever the employer is. But there have been some labor cooperatives in which migrant labor are part of it. But they are still not like full members as the local, with all the full facilities of the local in the cooperatives. So it's one of the discussion that is going on is in terms of migrant labor that are coming in terms of social security, and also having a say in that particular industry or that particular work, about forming labor, because there's also a lot of skilled, these are also skilled niches that are getting filled. So therefore, this is the kind of discussion that is going on about social security kind of measures. And so I think these are things that which can, other states also um, can also things that you can learn from some of the models that are being, tried out in different states, which are sort of, conducive to and towards the labor, migrant labor, towards them, you know, there has to be a state level of these. So in the different states, there's really that interstate migrant. Why you can say is because labor is not significant for them. That's all you can say. So therefore, despite you can see that every aspect of your life, that's a labor that was moving, touches every aspect of your life. Whether it's middle class people, their domestic labor in their house. There was a whole lot of discussion on social media. My maid has not come 2 months, and there's some people who are not paying them for those 2 months. They've returned, and all kinds of complaints. And so therefore, there are a whole range of, now we see the presence and the need in our daily lives, particularly those from middle classes and more privileged sections and all that. So it's sort of that visibility of the load of labor is coming up. But still, because the central government and the different states, particularly with the labor codes, that the central government is enacting the labor code, that sort of erodes all the labor rights that has been won through since post-independence. So therefore, like what value will interstate migrant act or any of these acts have, or even your constitutional guarantees? What value will they have if all labor? In fact, UP UP had suspended for 3 days, had suspended all labor laws. Then they had to take it back because there was a backlash to it. All labor laws are going to be suspended indefinitely because of COVID. And it should be the opposite. All the rights should be preserved. In pandemics, all rights should be preserved. So therefore, the reason is also, but thing is that in parts, in some states, people are implementing. It's not at all implementing, but in parts, they are implementing. But there's no comprehensive kind of, overall, the Interstate Migrant Act is just very weak in most of the states.
The second question is from Dr. Veena Purnacha, and she would like to know how the migrants and other poor households were affected by the environmental disasters in Kerala, and how has Kerala tackled with this crisis?
Yeah, so I think this is very important because 2018 was the floods, the big floods. Then 2019, so rebuilding started, rebuilding of houses and rebuilding of livelihoods, all that started. Then with no support from the central government. Central government, in fact, even charged funds for the air, the boats that were requisite for saving people. Even the few helicopters that came to pick people up from various places. Even that charges were taken up, and in fact, the food which came in from the central government, there was a charge that was given. Several crores even for the extra food supply that came in during just immediately after the 2018 floods. So there is a very big element of the federal structure and the kind of throttling opposition kind of state, particularly opposition state. Some states are getting a big bonanza, like Bihar has got a huge funds now because the elections are coming there. But some states, they just no funds. And then also they enacted this, which is not really a policy of not any external aid should not be allowed. It was actually a kind of a note during Manmohan Singh's, when he was a prime minister. It was just a cabinet note at a certain stage that we won't take this aid because we are sort of giving aid to other countries. That was part of the strategy of the government, central government, to get a seat in the UN Security Council, to say that we are no longer developing, we are actually giving aid to. So it was just a cabinet note, it wasn't a policy or anything. But that was used by the Modi government to say that, that no external aid. So from the Gulf countries, there were these huge, Malayalis, they who work in so many, in their millions were working outside, just poured in a lot of, then everything had to just go to the Chief Minister's Relief Fund, so directly from there. So so what's happening is the rebuilding is done, then there was the next year there was another big flood, which is North Kerala, So there, which hadn't been affected, also got affected again, and they lost a thing. And the third also that then there was this Nipah outbreak of various illnesses, which actually prepared Kerala for this pandemic, because of that Nipah was also an unknown disease which came, and they managed to control it. And interestingly, that I'd like to tell you also that there have been some studies on smallpox eradication, and we find that all these strictures of lockdown and all actually come from that, in terms of quarantine and in terms of identifying households and isolating people. This actually comes from the smallpox eradication, by 70s, late 70s and all that, mid 70s, smallpox got eradicated in India. So some of these strictures which have now come now, and which was tried out in the Nipah in Kerala also. Then after that is now the pandemic. But the health system, fortunately, that Kerala has a very its strength is two things are the strength. One is the local governance, and two, linked with this is the public health system. I think that is what sort of things there, but the government programs definitely have taken a, though they are ongoing, there somehow the government has, through various investments and all, and through a lot of support from Malayalis outside, have managed to do doing housing, and so the rebuilding is like rebuilding again and again every year with heavy rains, so it's like there's been no stop, so therefore rebuilding it's taking place though, but there is, I think, vulnerable areas are still there in Adivasi areas and Dalit colonies, and these are sort of some of the areas which need, like they sort of need more focus now, and I think that's what's taking place, and politically.
No, but
also,
Meera, you'd also agree that the tensions between state borders have also increased during this pandemic time.
Yes.
Because Kerala had an ongoing battle with Karnataka.
Yes, I'll tell you, there's some good story.
The borders were closed. And
yeah, but
Kerala
some good story has
get food
but some good story has emerged out of that. Is that that Kasaragod area, the public health system was a bit weak. So it's to depend
they had to depend on Karnataka for that.
Now the super speciality and special hospital, so that has come up now. And lately it's just opened also.
No, I was focusing more on the disasters that have taken place in Kerala during this pandemic. That is Idukki, Wayanad. There have been people who are buried under the soil. So it's sort of aggravated. The pandemic is aggravated.
One of the things is, of course, the landslide was in actually a plantation. It was in a plantation area. So the plantation, the way the housing still in those lined houses is still colonial times, So the plantation with, earning so much of profit have not been able to do any of those things. And not only that, see what's happening is because these continuous rains and all, the soil is getting, losing its immunity, And so the studies are saying there could be more in areas like this area never had one, So now that, all that, also now this whole thing of alternate housing in that area, it has to be close to their work areas, A lot of the labor is like, has come from Tamil Nadu, but they're settled in that area, So there's families going across over there. So, it's a difficult situation because you want to be near your work area, yet that the environmental degradation is going on. And a lot of it is also got to do with mining activities, So that is a big issue which needs to be addressed, I think, the quarrying that's going on. Apart from the soil itself, with these heavy rains continuously, and with climate change, I think both these have to be both man-made and environmental. This is a combination of the two, So as such, we are in a bad shape, I can say. But still, at least people are getting access to health. You see, in the pandemic, this thing, unmute, Veena.
Okay.
Veena ma'am, unmute. We are unable to hear you. Veena ma'am. No, we are not able to hear you, Veena ma'am, what you wanted to say.
You have to unmute.
Yeah, I did. No, that's precisely what happened in Kodagu also. We are in a very, very bad shape, and the crisis has got aggravated by this environmental disasters. The same problems you face, we too have faced in a similar manner. That's what I want.
What about Mumbai and Maharashtra?
Oh yes, Mumbai too.
Yeah, Mumbai, of course. Mumbai, but the rains did not. I mean, of course, the rains did cause this havoc in places like Kolhapur and all. There was a lot of flooding. Then you had the cyclone, which did affect Ratnagiri and Konkan. But at least the mainstream newspaper said that government did provide immediate help. And second thing is that. I mean, the narrative is the same. I think pandemic has just further aggravated the situation. You know, this were already there. I mean, the larger environmental crisis was there already. And now if you see, government of Maharashtra is giving a special boost to tourism. You know, I mean, now you have come up with new plans, like some new forms of tourism and all. So the whole debate between livelihood and development, I don't know whether, you know, we can really roll back our models of, I mean, this modernity, which believes in certain kinds of development. I mean,
Okay, I also want to give you some information because this Kerala team had medical team, Maharashtra government had asked for a medical team and a very
yeah, that's very
high-level
interesting. Yeah,
doctor. Yeah, they have
yes,
since
yes.
returned, but one of the information they gave is on Dharavi. It is very interesting that they gave. They said that one of the things is that the migrant labor from there was totally evacuated. So,
Yes,
for instance,
yes.
some areas in Tamil Nadu and some other states, lakhs have returned, you know. So they
Okay.
cleared the area in a way, in
No,
that
but
area. And
uh,
no,
but you know,
no, this,
Mira, you
this is
actually
people.
had you actually had MLAs saying that till we clear the place, till the migrants leave, we won't be able to control the
Yeah, yeah.
situation.
So it is really not a model, really, because you're
No, no.
forcefully evacuating people,
Yes.
and then you say it's you know it's
And then
bring a
you're
only
being,
disease, you
yeah.
know.
And
And
then
there were
you're being,
lakhs who arrived in like what is some area in Tamil Nadu, about a whole lakhs just arrived suddenly, you know.
no, and you know
Mm.
what? They have also used, especially the NCP, these MLAs have used the pandemic to clear Dharavi because they want to rebuild. You know, the whole redevelopment plan is going on, and there has been stiff resistance. So they saw the pandemic as an this excuse also. You know.
Opportunity, as an
Yeah,
Yes.
opportunity to overtake the land.
Yeah.
Yes.
for
Yeah.
the
Yeah.
real estate
Yes.
people, no?
Yes. Yes.
Yes,
Yes. Because Bombay basically, I mean, survives on real estate.
yeah. Because in Kerala, suddenly there were people who were saying, oh, Dharavi model. Then this doctor came back and then he sort of gave a talk on what's happening and the experience. And
Right.
he said,
Right.
this is
Right.
what really happened. And
Right.
not only that, they were pushed to other areas in Mumbai and Maharashtra. So those areas pandemic started spreading in those
Yes,
areas.
yes, yes. So now it is, of course, Pune, which is the highest, you know, in the whole country, which is
Yes.
the highest in the whole country. Yeah. So Sangeeta, we move. I
Yes.
think
Now there are two
Veena had another
questions.
questions. Yeah.
Yes, there are two questions. So there is one more question from Veena ma'am. She wants to know what is basically the different experiences rather between urban migrants and agricultural migrants of Kerala. You have already mentioned
No,
about the plantation economy, but the difference between the urban and the
no,
agriculture.
so I think in the there is when that's been very seasonal. It's all seasonal. Uh, the rural migrants still not such a large sections, but it's very seasonal over there. But I mean, Kerala, you see, this rural urban is not like Maharashtra or Karnataka or anything. It's sort of
Okay.
contiguous. So that
No,
the
actually, Meera, may I
yeah,
add?
rural urban is not. It's not just the city. It's like it's the urbanization has taken place in the opposite direction. It's not the city sort of going and grabbing more of the rural areas. Here's
I think
the rural
Veena
areas
ma'am
develop.
wants to know about the plantation economy. I think that's
No,
Yeah, the
actually,
plantation. No,
Meera, what I want to know
whatever
is,
we are saying, there is a shift in the kind of labor that's coming, and that particularly this even we know. We didn't know about it that this is happening in terms of the Tamil women labor sort of going back to other work in Tamil Nadu and tribal labor coming from Jharkhand, Chhattisgarh, and Odisha. Because only when they were leaving, we got to know. that there is, there's this shifts in. So I think these all need now more investigation in terms of particularly Kerala, because almost every niche is now, is now occupied by migrant labor. Almost all
Yeah.
niches of the
No,
economy.
that's
So,
the same
and
thing
then
which is
now,
happening in
so,
Kodagu.
yeah, but no, it's different because now the Malayalis are returning back.
Hmm.
See, from,
No, that's
and
going to happen throughout. But what I'm
no,
asking
it's not the
during
same
the
because,
pandemic in terms of access to resources, the
yeah, no,
differences in
see,
their access.
no, see, the agricultural work and all these, there's a lot of attention now being, paid to agricultural work. All started on time, and in terms of, see, Kerala is a food insecure place in terms of food production. So that is one of the things now that's happening in terms of, not only kitchen garden, but even all, where there are water bodies and where there is public land, they can be leased by groups, self-help groups or, a panchayat or something to start growing food crops and vegetables, because vegetables we are totally dependent on Tamil Nadu. And so therefore this the food, these are some of the things which have, because of the pandemic, I think some of these what is this, what are the kind of things that you need to manage with self-sufficient, those, I think these are issues which are coming up. I think it will come up everywhere, you know particularly the need to be self-sufficient because of the closing up. As there was problems with Karnataka, with Tamil Nadu, Kerala had a much better relationship because the two chief ministers and the ministers met and they worked out things between the two. But with Karnataka, there was really a very difficult in terms of interstate sort of, business and trade that is going on. Some of it is now going back, but I think a lot of it is now in Kerala has shifted to, being secure in having your food production. This kind of shift. It just started, I could say, So people are getting, seeds and all. Even apartments, people are growing vegetables now. Apartments, and wherever you have little space, you're growing. You get government support for those kind of things to get going. So I think these
Thank
are
you.
the kind of changes that are taking place. But migrant labor, important thing is that in Kerala there has to be a whole new policy. One is migrant labor, Malayali labor, which has gone to various countries, are coming back in their millions. 1 million more is expected by end of October, November, So they maybe they will not go back to what they were doing earlier. They have other aspirations. On the other hand, there are a lot of skilled people coming back. Skilled women, with very higher level of skills who are coming back. So you need a new model of kind of development, how you go ahead. The development programs will have to be very new, and a new conversation will also have to take place involving all those who've come back, as well as the local migrants who are here. There has to be a conversation involving those sections, so that there is a more inclusive kind of and new avenues are sought, new models. But these are all very difficult things in the middle of the pandemic, where it's growing also. Because people need livelihood, so people are interacting more, and then the disease is also spreading. So there are these kind of things which are there. So the migrant labor situation will not be the same as earlier because of this return migrants which are there, as well as the, that you maintain your basic uh, um, welfare standards which are there already prevailing, that you maintain those basic rights should be maintained, and then try out new things. That's I think the challenge.
We have one last question for the day. That's from Dr. Putul Sathe. Uh, we actually in your session you mentioned about the lack of databases. So lack of data related to migrant issue, she says, will have a severe impact on social science research in the field and framing of policies. So, but what will be the long-term implication?
No, I don't think there's a lack of data like that. There's quite a lot of data. A lot of studies have been going on migrant, and IAWS has been having the regional conferences, and we recently had the Central India and some part of Eastern India involving Jharkhand, Chhattisgarh, Odisha, Madhya Pradesh, and all. So there are studies there were presentations of studies from those areas which are taking place. So studies are ongoing, and there will be databases which are there. Some very good databases are emerging. So there's no crisis in database, but we need to collect more to go into the nuances of which policy or a design of a program need. So those are there. But studies are, even from Bengal, some very good studies have come out. Yeah, labor studies are ongoing. Only thing is in a new situation, new context, there are newer vulnerabilities, newer inequalities, and scarcer resources. So therefore, there are newer challenges.
Meera, can I just add on, Meera? Can I just add on? Because if you see that state is not playing any role, I mean, more or less this research is coming from civil society, the NGOs and all. So my larger issue was that, of course, now I'm going slightly beyond the scope of the topic and saying that looking at the attitude of the state and the manner in which it has been handling higher education and also research as far as social science is concerned. Is this not a very deliberate attempt to mute certain kind of narrative, certain kind of, you can say, narratives? And in future, when we look at the archive, like the way, we are now looking back at the Spanish flu and the way we are reading it, what will be the long-term implications then? That is what I actually wanted to talk about.
No, in fact, there's some ways, I looked at some of these very interesting historical studies on from Spanish flu to various other, and very interesting. And one of the things that really comes out is of labor emerging, how a reorganization of labor as well as more assertions, which emerge from that because of going through so much of deprivations,
Yeah.
So there are these are kind of lessons which are coming, and no, I don't think the thing is the priorities of this. I mean, I can't say state is not just a very neutral term like that. It's like central government, the different states, all that. So there are, many departments and others are conducting studies. Labor departments in many states, they are doing that. But centrally, at the central government level, there is really not that kind of. The priorities are very different,
Yeah.
Therefore, you can see that, what is being focused daily that you see are all completely nothing to do with these.
Right.
Even the pandemic growth is being denied.
True. Yes.
And the number of deaths which are so high, even that itself is saying, oh, compared with the population, it's not really. But even a small percentage is huge.
Yes.
Lives are very important, And so therefore, it's not. It's just that the priorities and the nature is quite different, So, but it's not just NGOs, but I think departments and all are trying to do these studies which are going on over there.
Yeah.
And particularly, I find that some of the disciplines have been very active in this, definitely in economics, in gender studies is, I think, in that way, gender studies and some of the studies of exclusion and, those sort of centers are doing very good work. So we have to find our spaces within the system, academic system, and continue, because even the UGC funding beyond September, we are yet not sure.
Yes.
So we
Yes.
don't know, like, and with the new education policy, gender studies doesn't even
Yes.
figure in one line, you know.
Yes, yes, those are larger questions here. We still have one more question.
One more
I
question.
think.
Yes.
Yeah.
Can we take that one question? I
Yes,
think we
yes,
should.
yes, sure.
It's from Madhura, and she wants to know about reverse migration. Insights on reverse migration, he's saying, is one of the key aspects, and what would be your suggestions in terms of policies?
Yeah, in fact, this is the studies which I have cited are from those who've gone back to the different states, so these smaller kind of things, you know. So there were these which I had pointed out were of different sections. One is that, of course, immediately is these sort of the government programs which are the you know, particularly the healthcare and related kind of services, essential services that are there. The other is that the weakening of the social security, different kind of social security schemes and food security. These I had spelled out in my thing. And then also, you know, like closure of Anganwadis, various institutions which sort of are linked with the social welfare of the people who have returned. In fact, the whole discussion is based on the people who have returned, reverse, who've come back to the villages, you know, and how these programs, whether they are by the government or the states, whether they are reaching to them, and what are the kind of, the lacuna is definitely in the kind of coordination. One is a lack of a policy, you know, a sort of comprehensive policy that is lacking, you know. Then this coordination between different levels, even if you look at any of these, you know, various programs of food or whatever announced by the central government, the sort of thing between the centrally and the labor at the state level and then the local level, these coordinations just do not take place. So the access and its reach is just not there, you know. And then, of course, we know that the main policy thing is also particularly about in terms of having these, you know, registration and identity cards, which sort of ensure the social security, which is portable. You know, these are some of the points in my discussion which I have said. And the whole discussion is based on the studies which have come of reverse migrants who've gone back.
There is one more last question. Meera, there's one more last question.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's from Nutan, and she's saying that so much money is coming in to combat the COVID pandemic, and at the same time, corruption levels are also increasing. So, how does one keep a check on this?
I don't know, where are funds coming for COVID? Where are funds coming? The states
I think
getting
it would
funds?
be the relief funds and all, which I think Nutan wants to.
Also, the PM Care, of course, is out of reach.
In fact, 2 or 3 days back, the government has announced a new directive to the different states of what is to be done to migrant labor who have returned. It's just come out. I've not seen it. I saw the document yesterday. There are directives to the states of how to, what are the kind of program that is needed for migrant labor. That has just come out now. You know, when they're already there and they're going back to wherever they were working, you know, it has just come out. That is there. But I don't know about these funds because Kerala has really not got any points to this. You know, as a resource. I mean, some of the opposition rule states are really getting strangled, you know, and squeezing, getting squeezed by and totally eroding the federal kind of rights of the states, you know. So this about funds coming in and corruption, one doesn't know about. The other states will have to. What is your thing from Maharashtra?
So Nutan, do you want to step in? Hello, Nutan. Maharashtra, of course, there's a lot of corruption in the sense that when people are approaching hospitals, especially the private hospitals, you know, they are being fleeced, where the state has had to intervene. I mean, it has happened in Maharashtra, where, you know, finally the state has basically appointed some inspectors who are now going around to check that patients are not being fleeced, especially in the private hospitals.
Yeah, because the public health itself was inadequate, you know, was not enough
Yes.
reaching to people, you know. So you know, and neither I think definitely in Mumbai and Maharashtra, I think the initial preparations for the strictures of COVID were not really put in place,
No.
because see, if you see Dharavi also, there are so many
Yes.
NGOs and all working in that
Yes.
area. And so
Yes.
many organizations. Why suddenly the police only land up there? Why were they not consulted and something worked out there, you know?
Right.
Instead of just forcefully evacuating everybody from there and then say that, oh, Dharavi model, there's no more
Yeah.
disease there, you know?
Right.
Also, I think in the hospitals, for the private hospitals, they had put a cap on the charges that can, because
I
initially,
think
yes, it was a lot of,
that was a good
it
measure.
was
That,
yes,
yeah,
so
though
that was
late,
one
but
of the,
yeah.
and I think the Dharavi model is also done with an idea to sell it to the other countries as to how we have tackled, but that's a way of marketing development and saying how Maharashtra has done pretty well.
Mhm.
So
By evacuating all the labor forcibly.
Yeah.
yeah, right. So
Yeah.
thank you so much, Dr. Meera, for your time and for this such an engaging session that we had today with you. And I may now request Dr. Puttul Sathi, the head of Department of RCWS, to convey a vote of thanks.
Thank you, Sangeeta.
Yeah. Yeah. Meera, so
Yeah.
on behalf of the Research Center for Women's Studies, I thank Meera for this a very lecture which was wide in its spectrum and which covered so many aspects. Frankly speaking, I mean there were so many aspects which I think which most of the participants and for us was really very helpful. So with this, we come to the end of the session. And Meera, I really thank you. And I hope that we get a chance to meet again.
Yeah,
And yes,
definitely.
I hope we do get a chance to meet again. So we come to the end of the session.